Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. Closing arguments are set for Monday in the federal trial of Chicago Alderman Patrick Daley Thompson. The defense rested today without calling Thompson to the stand. Defense attorneys have sought to make the case that Thompson was disorganized and, quote, frazzled when he allegedly falsely claimed a mortgage interest deduction on a loan that wasn't a mortgage. Thompson is also charged with lying to lenders about how much he owed on loans he took out. And we'll have much more on this in a bit. Mayor Lori Lightfoot hints at new efforts to entice the Bears to stay at Soldier Field. Speaking on WSCR The Score Sports Radio this morning, Lightfoot said the city would be making a, quote, very compelling financial case as to why it makes abundant sense for the Bears to stay in Chicago. This comes as the mayor launched an advisory committee to reimagine the museum campus, including Soldier Field. The Bears have inked a deal with the property in Arlington Heights that housed the famed Arlington Park Racecourse, which closed for good last year. And it's time to get those dibs items out of the street. City streets and sand crews were going around today removing items like tables, chairs, and vacuum cleaners and other household items that Chicagoans have used to mark out their parking spots. The city warned folks earlier this week to remove those items by today in an effort to clear those residential streets of clutter. Dibs might be a Chicago tradition, but it is not necessarily legal, even if it isn't really illegal either. Very confusing. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Craig Dellamore of WBBM News Radio, Sarah Schulte of ABC7 Chicago, Lourdes Duarte of WGN-TV News, and John Seidel of the Chicago Sun-Times. Let's get right to it. Governor J.B. Pritzker says the state's mask mandate will lift at the end of the month, saying the move is not political. It is about shrinking number of hospitalizations. Take a look.
We're seeing a trajectory of those hospitalizations. We've come from 7,300, more than that, down to under 2,500 just in the last 4 weeks. And over the next couple of weeks, before we get to February 28th, I think we all expect to see a continuation of that trend.
So Sarah Schulte, J.B. Pritzker, banking on the continued drop-off in COVID cases by February 28th. Is there anything that could put a damper on those plans to lift the indoor mask mandate?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I know that he says he's following the science, but let's be real here. He's running for re-election. And of course, politics was part of the motivation here. I mean, you know, he's following Democratic governors from around the country that are, you know, they don't want to go into November being the party of shutdowns, you know, so they're trying to get this behind them as quickly as possible. I mean, he obviously is following the science, but you know, there's no way that I don't think they're going to go back unless there's, you know, another variant that comes that's, you know, that's worse than Omicron. But for now, you know, absolutely not. And it's, you know, it's not really a risky move to do what he's doing. I mean, it's pretty low risk. So many other governors have already done it. So.
And those projections are pretty solid from epidemiologists that those hospitalizations will continue to fall. Fingers crossed. Craig Dellamore, Mayor Lightfoot is hinting that she too is going to follow suit for the city of Chicago. Does that mean the indoor vaccination mandate will lift too on February 28th?
They are certainly thinking about it. They're certainly talking about it. She is going to follow really the state. And in fact, there were some aldermen who were demanding that she lift the requirements this weekend so that Super Bowl weekend could be free of such requirements. But with the state mandate still in place, the city couldn't, even if they wanted to, and she doesn't want to.
And I was just going to bring that up. There are a handful of aldermen saying lift it now so that restaurants can have Super Bowl parties or Valentine's Day events without that vax mandate. Lourdes Duarte, we're already in the weekend. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen, right?
Absolutely not. We would have heard from her by now if that were going to happen, or we would have heard from the governor if that were to be the case. I would imagine that come February 28th, when the mask mandate is lifted, that will then give some room for the mayor to lift some of the restrictions that we have here in Chicago. And you talk about restaurants and hotels and big venues like that. I mean, they've been waiting for a long time for that to happen, because really it's been affecting their bottom line, and they need those patrons, those customers to start coming back. This would have been a good weekend for it, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
John Seidel, I want to pick up on this notion of politics, as Sarah brought up. Is there politics in this decision-making now, especially when you consider a lot of blue state governors are lifting these restrictions right now as primaries for midterms ramp up?
I mean, I would certainly expect so, just like Sarah has said. I mean, I think I think it's going to be really hard for them to separate that from their thinking. And it looks like all of Governor Pritzker's opponents are making this into a big issue. It is a big issue. It's something that a lot of people are concerned about, businesses, schools. I just don't see how it doesn't even unintentionally factor in. So I would suspect so.
You're right. His opponents on the GOP side have made mandates a big issue. Craig Dellimore, does this neutralize that as a political issue as the election comes closer?
I don't think it neutralizes it, because one of the arguments that the Republicans especially have been making is that the governor was doing this. It was go-it-alone policy making, and that he was not considering other opinions. And they're still going to say that and say it was our pressuring that got him to do it. So no, this issue is it's got legs, not as much legs as the crime issue, but it's still got legs.
And still at issue, of course, is mask mandates in school, which the governor said will not lift on February 28th. Sarah Schulte, this amid the court decision last week that basically nullified that mask mandate. So give us a sense of what school districts still have that mandate in place and what don't.
Well, I mean, there's quite a few that still have it in place, and they're certainly hearing it from parents. I mean, not all parents. I mean, the whole thing really in the last few days is just because of this court decision really has been a big mess. I mean, really a big mess in the suburbs. There's some school districts are doing it, some are making it optional, some are wiping it out. Then you can throw in the Catholic schools in there. It is just an absolute mess. I mean, I think in Geneva, there's even 2 school board members that just quit because they were upset that the administration decided to close school this past Monday while they were trying to, interpret the legal decision over this. But I'll tell you, it really is these schools. Who you have to feel sorry for in all of this probably are superintendents, who have been dealing with this, for the last, they've been kind of, right in the line of fire from both sides for the last 2 years, and definitely this week over this whole mask mandate.
And can I jump in on one quick point, though? Little known and not as widely reported has been the fact that decision, even that judge's decision, made an exception for collective bargaining agreements. That's what's happening in Chicago, that there is an agreement with the teachers that they aren't going to lift that mandate. And that's happening in a number of districts. And so we have to remember, in some cases, there's already something that prevents them from taking it away.
Lourdes, how do you think this gets resolved?
Yeah, you know what? I don't think it's going to be resolved anytime soon. So we saw an entire week of protests. This entire week, there were protests every day. We would cover 2 or 3 of them over the course of the news cycle. And you've got to think that it doesn't end today. It's going to continue into the coming days, the coming weeks, until this is played out legally and they can figure out, will that mask mandate be lifted come February 28th, let's say, or even, a few days or a few weeks after that. Until that happens, you're going to continue to see these protests at many of the suburban schools, maybe even Chicago schools, or outside some of these facilities. So it doesn't end anytime soon.
Seems like.
Well, and talk about political. I mean, I was at a protest, I think, on Hinsdale on Monday, and there were, I think, 1 or 2 candidates that were Republican candidates that were there. I mean, so clearly this is, they're trying to hop onto this issue, trying to be part of these protests as well. So, wasn't just parents and kids out there upset over masks.
And it's speaking of tensions and political tensions, Sarah, you reported this week on State Representative Conroy, a Democrat who had received some really vile messages because of misinformation on mask mandates. Tell us what happened there. Yeah,
She introduced or proposed some legislation that was already kind of part of an existing bill that really all it really does is require the state to release data to local health departments quicker. I mean, and not just data on the coronavirus, also data that has to do with all sorts of other public health issues. And a couple online publications took it out of context, and it just misinformation completely blew up to the point where it was being reported that she wanted to put unvaccinated people in concentration camps. So, and as a result of it, she has had, protests in front of her office. She's had death threats. I mean, when I spoke to her, she was really shaken. I mean, really emotionally shaken over this whole thing. That's what also prompted a letter from Speaker Chris Welch to Republican leader Durkin, and then the governor's office got involved with letters going back and forth on trying to do something about it.
Everyone asking the other side to tone down the rhetoric here.
Mm-hmm.
I want to move over to some crime issues. John Seidel this week, CPD and Mayor Lightfoot said they were going to make some more changes to CPD's foot chase policy after the Adam Toledo case and the Anthony Alvarez case. They tried a round of this before. There was some pushback saying it didn't go far enough. So what will these new changes do?
I don't know that I can really speak to that. I know that they've been working on they said they were going to expand, I believe, the carjacking task force as well. And that was a big issue that they were going to push into. And I think federal prosecutors have been interested in helping out with that too. I think the U.S. Attorney's Office has also made a big push to help with the carjacking problem.
All right, tell us what they're going to do to beef up the carjacking task force.
Well, I think it's just kind of like another expansion of that effort because of the surge. I think we've seen this before. We've seen some prominent federal cases about that as well. I think we're just kind of going to wait and see if it's a problem that's actually resolved here.
In fact, Mayor Lightfoot kind of stole the spotlight from that by blaming the rise in carjackings on remote learning and kids not being in school. Lourdes Duarte had prompted an angry pushback from CTU. Is there data that supports that that's the case?
So according to the mayor, there is data. I personally have not seen it, but obviously I've heard them talk about this data that's out there, that half of the carjacking suspects have been juveniles, whether or not they were, at school or not, or were supposed to be at school at the time. I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but obviously it all falls in line with the COVID pandemic and, the remote learning shutdown. So is there a relationship between the two? I guess you could make one if you look at those numbers, but that really angered CTU, basically saying that she's not looking at the root of the issue of poverty and some of the equity issues in our underserved communities, that's what really she should be focusing in on instead of, sending blame to students or blaming students for some of these carjackings that didn't happen.
And in fact, CTU sought to make the case that the rise in carjackings began before the pandemic, although it is very clear that the pandemic exacerbated existing problems with inequities and with crime. It appears a case that deepened the divide between Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx has now brought them closer together. So the two appeared at a news conference earlier this week to announce charges in a deadly shootout in Austin. Take a look at that.
And another important message that I want to stress today is that of unity. I stand here with the state's attorney and the superintendent, united in our common purpose and commitment to bring peace to our residents.
Craig Delmore, we've heard this constant drumbeat of the blame game. Mayor Lightfoot calling out State's Attorney Kim Foxx for not prosecuting tough enough, for letting people out on electronic monitoring, or calling out the judges on that. So have they mended their fences here?
I think to some degree they have, especially with State's Attorney Kim Foxx, because really, remember, these, even with the chief judge, they are all on the same side when it comes to bail reform. They all talk on the same side. This issue of people being let out, and even the case where this was a guy who was not charged with, who was accused of being a combatant and not necessarily somebody who instigated a fight. Anyway, all of this is legalese, but the bottom line is that they've been trying to work together because, frankly, it started looking bad that the Cook County State's Attorney and the mayor couldn't get along. So they have cooperated. In fact, we've seen them together maybe 4 times in the last couple of weeks. So they are trying to show a sense of unity, even if still the chief judge is not on the same page with the mayor, at least, on everything.
And certainly for the sake of the city, those two offices have to be seen working in coordination. Meanwhile, there's some internal union politics with the FOP. Craig, President John Catanzara is now making his members pay $240 more per year so he can raise $2.5 million for a union political fund. Oh, by the way, he also said he wants to run for mayor. So does this sound like, I don't know, potentially a slush fund that Catanzara could control as he tries to take on Mayor Lightfoot?
If he gets some opposition within the FOP, it certainly will be a campaign issue. And I think, especially because of the amount of money we're talking about, you may see some pushback even from the regular rank and file, who may be getting tired of the back and forth, high-level, bitter rhetoric between Catanzara and the mayor. Yes, it helps their position and bolsters it sometimes, but sometimes it stops things in their track.
Well, Lourdes, sticking with crime here, I want to pick up on a story that you covered this week. You tracked down a retired Chicago police detective, Reynaldo Guevara, who has cost the city tens of millions of dollars because of Reynaldo Guevara, that is, because of wrongful conviction lawsuits. Remind us who he is, and did he say anything to you because you went down to San Antonio and you found him?
Yeah, and let me just sort of back up a little bit and tell you why this story became significant in this moment in time. We were talking about Kim Foxx, State's Attorney Kim Foxx. She 2 years ago said she would review some pending cases linked to this former Chicago detective. And here we are almost 2 years later, and those reviews haven't happened. And so people are starting to ask questions and pushing for those reviews to be completed. Reynaldo Guevara is a former Chicago detective. He used to patrol the streets of Humboldt Park. And back in the 80s and 90s, he was kind of notorious, well known for being the detective who would solve crimes that other cops couldn't solve. Fast forward to today, decades later, and dozens of men, we're talking over 50 men, basically say that they were framed through coerced confessions, manipulating witnesses and evidence. And in fact, there have been about a dozen cases or so that have been overturned. 4 men have settled with the city for millions of dollars. The city has had to pay these 4 men about $50 million and spent, another $20 million in attorney's fees. So that was a story that we followed when we went to San Antonio, which is where he retired. He basically ran from our cameras the minute he saw us, so you could tell that he's definitely hiding in San Antonio.
I saw the story. He left his little dog outside, and you had to caress the dog until he opened the door a crack and then let the dog in. But as I understand, Lourdes, you'll keep following this because there are more cases in the pipeline connected to Guevara. I want to move on to the federal case of Alderman Patrick Daley Thompson, John Seidel. This defense that he's clumsy, he's frazzled, he's disorganized. He didn't improperly claim that mortgage interest tax deduction. He didn't lie to the lenders about what he owed. How is that argument going over in the courtroom?
I think that Alderman Thompson's defense has been scoring some key points. We'll see. We're going to find out probably early next week exactly how well it's going over, because we're going to have arguments before the jury, closing arguments on Monday. Just tonight, we've seen a little bit of briefs filed going back and forth about jury instructions, which could be crucial here. No, I think it's been far more interesting than expected for kind of a dry tax case at the end of the day.
And also lawyers they want to drop the charges related to him allegedly lying to the lenders about what he owed. What's the likelihood of success there?
Oh, so the judge denied that early this morning, and you're right. And that's kind of part of what I was talking about. So that Alderman Thompson, part of the charge is that he lied to the 2 contractors for the FDIC about how much he had gotten from this bank in Bridgeport. But when his defense attorney cross-examined them on Thursday, he questioned them on pretty much the exact language of the charges that Alderman Thompson lied. And these 2 contractors didn't really agree. Their testimony didn't seem to support the charge. I'm sure prosecutors would say that's not the end of the argument, but we did have arguments this morning about whether or not those counts should be thrown out. Judge Valderrama denied that request, but he noted that there's an extremely high bar for granting something like that. So those counts still stand. They're going to go to the jury, and we'll see.
So those counts still stand, but perhaps the defense making a strong case. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, when was the last time a public official
beat
was
the
found
feds?
not guilty in the federal building? I'm just...
Oh, well, I was going to ask that to you, Sarah. Is Patrick Daley Thompson going to be the first alderman in a long time to basically beat the feds? I mean, I think there were a few or public officials several years ago, maybe LaShawn Ford, state representative, he had his case dropped, but not many beat the feds. Will he be the one?
I don't know. I haven't asked John. I haven't sat through the trial, but well, let's put it this way. I think it's pretty significant if John just said that, the defense has been winning some key points. I mean, you go into I've covered, quite a few cases at the Dirksen building, and when the feds bring a case against you, it's a pretty strong one.
And John, part of, as I understand, I mean, the prosecution can't really bring up the whole history of that bank, Washington Federal, and all the things that your paper has basically outlined about how problematic it was.
Right, that's not part of the case. And there was this whole multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. 14 people have been charged in connection with that. Alderman Thompson is not one of them. His prosecution is kind of an offshoot of that. So no, they can't really get into it. There's been some references to some things, so the jury might know something's up. But let me be clear. I mean, I do think the defense has scored some key points. I think defense at the Dirksen building is about mitigating the damage. I still think the safe bet is always with the U.S. Attorney's Office in that building. So we'll see.
Maybe they get him a lesser sentence or probation if there is a guilty verdict, but we don't know. We're going to hear closing arguments next week, and we'll follow your coverage of it. Craig Dellimore, the mayor, this week announced this Blue Ribbon Commission to re-envision the lakefront campus, Soldier Field, and then on Sports Radio this morning said that they're coming up with some kind of plan to entice the Bears to stay in Soldier Field. So she putting the cart before the horse here. Basically, there is a plan, even though this commission just got named.
Well, I think the commission members are certainly going to be wanting to know that. But let's face it, that campus, this is including the 3 museums, McCormick Place, and Soldier Field. It really does need some planning because the Lakeside Center, the big black low building on the lakefront, is going to go at some point. So, yeah, they got to figure something out. But what's happening here is that the city is trying to prove that it's not giving up on keeping the Bears in Chicago. And they're going to make, maybe this is a Hail Mary pass, but they're ready to start. It is a Hail Mary. Yeah, they're going to start making offers. And the mayor has been talking about that. She said they're willing to talk about changing the outside area. And she even talked about the sight lines and the weather inside Soldier Field being a problem.
I believe she used the word crappy.
Yes, I was trying to avoid that. Thank you.
Okay, but it was her words. All right, so Sarah Schulte, Lourdes Duarte, we've got all these Super Bowl wagers this weekend. If you were betting, what will it take to keep the Bears from moving to Arlington Heights?
I don't know if there's anything we can do.
I completely agree with Lourdes. I mean, the bottom line is that it's a small stadium. It's never going to be, even if you put a roof on it, I don't think it's ever going to still be big enough to host a Super Bowl. No, I completely agree. I don't think there's anything they can do. But I think with Craig, you have to do something. You have to, as a mayor, you can't just sit back and watch it happen.
Well, if they want to keep the colonnades, and this is the problem they had 20 years ago, there's nothing they can really do to make that any bigger. And to me, the only option they have is to build a brand new stadium somewhere, be it on the lakefront, be it the 78, but it just doesn't look like that's an option right now.
And it would have to be private financing because the mayor doesn't want to commit any city money to that.
Well, sticking with
they also, Soldier Field, you also have to lease it from the Park District. The Bears don't want to continue in a position like that for years to come. They need to make money off of their own stadium.
And that's why I'm saying some brand new stadium in Chicago is the only way that they're going to stay. That's my guess. I mean, I just don't see a future for Soldier Field, but we don't know. And the Bears have even said they don't know if they have the financing for building a big stadium in Arlington Heights yet. Before we go, anyone want to make their Super Bowl predictions right here on this show?
Bengals.
Bengals. All right. We've got one for the Bengals.
Bengals by 7.
Lourdes
I said 10, but...
Lourdes, Bengals 10. Craig, John?
I'm thinking Bengals.
I spent some of my youth just outside Cincinnati, so I'll go Bengals.
It's good.
Yeah.
I think it should be a good game, though.
Both cities I know are very excited, and we're left to watch here as usual this time of year, but perhaps next year. And we're out of time, so our thanks to Craig Delamore, Sarah Schulte, Lourdes Duarte, and John Seidel. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, and then immediately after that, Chicago Tonight Black Voices at 6:30. And then we're back at 7 o'clock all next week. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great night.